Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of Tider Insider Television, brought to you by, as we mentioned at the top, Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. Alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com, I'm WVUA 23 Sports Director Gary Harris. Alabama softball is where we're going to begin tonight, Rod. That's because the SEC tournament begins later this week down in Gainesville, Florida. Actually, it begins tomorrow. The Crimson Tide earned the number 2 seed and a first-round bye. Bama will play on Thursday at 1 p.m. Central Time, live on the SEC Network against the winner of Wednesday's game between Missouri and Auburn. If the first opponent is the Missouri Tigers, Alabama will certainly not have to worry about a scouting report. They just played them in a 3-game series this past weekend at the Rhodes House. Alabama took 2 of 3 from Mizzou to wrap up the regular season. Alabama pitcher Montana Fouts is the SEC Pitcher of the Week again. That's the 4th time this season. She was the winning pitcher in both of Alabama's wins against Mizzou on Saturday and Sunday. The Crimson Tide finished the regular season with a 41-10 overall record and 16-8 mark in SEC play. And the Tide won 6 of its 8 SEC series and won all 4 of them at home. And Rodney, you know where Alabama softball wants to get, and that's the Women's College World Series. They've still only won the one national championship 10 years ago in 2012, but much like the Alabama football program, the expectation at Alabama for softball is that you will be in the hunt. And to do that, you've got to win a regional and a super regional to make it to the Women's College World Series. But still, the SEC tournament is huge. Alabama finished second, as I mentioned, in the regular season, behind Arkansas. This is not the most important tournament, obviously, for this team with postseason play, but it is a big one. Alabama loves to win SEC championships, whether the regular season or the tournament title.
Yeah, I think you want to, obviously, just like any other sport, you want to hit your stride there at tournament time, and I think this is a great opportunity. You want to have momentum, playing your best, and so I think this is really why it's important. I mean, this is where it is. This is where championships are won and lost. Alabama's certainly going to be a team to be reckoned with. And has that opportunity. Like you said, maybe the season didn't quite go as dominant as some fans expected, but this is still a really good team.
Yeah, and the pitching, Montana has still been phenomenal. Kilfoyle's been good, the entire pitching staff. Montana has a few losses, but Alabama offensively, while they've been solid, they don't have quite the pop, the power that some of these other lineups in the SEC have. And, Rodney, you know how it is. When you play some close games, low-scoring games, you may not win them all. And that's what's happened, I think, to Montana. I think she's still been really, really strong this season. It's just that they have not maybe offensively been quite as potent as they had hoped they would be going into the season.
Well, and going into the season, actually, the first several games, Gary, they showed a lot of pop, scored a lot of runs. They were really powerful offensively. You thought they were going to have more firepower than maybe what they've had down the stretch. But, you know, this is an opportunity now to kind of get going again. Hopefully the bats get going. Give Montana Fouts, that pitching staff, some support. All
right, SEC tournament, then hopefully you host a regional and a super regional and a trip to the College World Series. You want to be one of 8. We know how strong Oklahoma is. They're the class, really, of the country. There are a lot of other good teams. Do you see this Alabama team as a potential national championship
Yeah,
team?
I mean, you mentioned Oklahoma. I mean, what a powerhouse. They're going to be difficult for anyone to beat. But, you know, Alabama, when you have the pitching, you have a chance. Really, if you look back 10 years ago when they won the national championship in 2012, you know, Gary, you could say Oklahoma was probably the better team at that time. Alabama played really well. So that's the importance that we're talking about, really kind of starting to hit your stride right now with the pitching that Alabama has. Hopefully the bats come alive. They'll certainly have a chance.
Yeah, 10 years ago, so maybe it's time for the second national championship for Bama softball. And now it's time for Coach Talk. On Saturday night in Birmingham, Alabama softball head coach Patrick Murphy was inducted into the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame. Through 23 seasons as head coach, 25 overall with the program. This is actually his 26th season with the program. Alabama's won a bunch of championships, 6 SEC tournament titles, 6 regular season championships, 1 national title. That's quite a resume, and one that Coach Murphy's former boss, Coach Mal Moore, would approve of. Coach Murphy shared a story about how the late, great Coach Moore laid down the Alabama standard of excellence very early in Murphy's coaching career.
The first year we won the SEC championship was 2006, and Mal Moore was my boss at the time. And it was at the football game. We got our rings. Mal was greeting us as we walked off the field, and he gave me a hug. And he didn't mean it in any sort of way. He just said, you know, anybody can win one championship, but it takes a really, really, really good program to be consistent at win year after year. And I took that to heart.
Okay, ready?
So it was quite a weekend for Coach Murphy. Also, former Alabama basketball and NBA star Keith Askins was inducted, and longtime Alabama practice official Eddie Conyers was awarded the Frank Pig House Award, which honors someone who has performed outstanding service in sports in Alabama, and Eddie Conyers has certainly done that. Askins, a great player with the Heat, still in that organization, now in the front office for more than 30 years now. He's been with the Miami Heat. Other inductees were Doyle Alexander, William Andrews, Rusty Greer, Jake Peavy, Phillip Rivers, and Justin Tuck. Quite a class, Rodney, and you love to see three guys connected with the University of Alabama, Patrick Murphy, Keith Askins, and Eddie Conyers, get their credit. And for Eddie Conyers, 94 years young, I had him on my radio show this morning. To win this award means a lot to him and a lot to his family, and it's great to see him get this recognition.
But I tell you what a guy. I mean, he is funny. I mean, if you ever need a speaker at a group, I mean, Eddie Conyers is just unbelievable. But, yeah, you know, Gary, all three of those guys, very deserving, certainly, and really happy for Eddie Conyers.
Well, the way it's going for Ajay Hall, I don't think we're going to see him in the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame. The former Alabama wide receiver now says he has an issue with Crimson Tide fans. Hall, a former four-star recruit, left Nick Saban's program earlier this offseason and just recently announced his transfer to Texas. He says one of the biggest differences that he's noticed since arriving in Austin is the fan base. Hall said he doesn't think the Alabama fan base is very loving, especially when compared to the Longhorns fans. Alabama plays Hall in Texas on September 10th in Austin. Should be interesting. All right, you've been in Texas, what, a couple of weeks? You haven't played a game yet? Haven't even gone through a practice? Drop a few balls for Texas and see how those fans are. Fans are fans. I think Alabama fans, in my opinion, were very gracious to him, even after he announced that he was leaving on social media. He was always out there on social media, you know, sometimes not with the most flattering comments for Alabama football. Your thoughts on Agiye Hall? And, you know, it's one thing to move on, kind of just move on and start a new chapter is the way I look at it.
Well, I kind of really get the impression that Agiye Hall is looking for somebody to blame, that it didn't work out well for him here. Certainly the Alabama fans were very supportive. I looked at a lot of things on Twitter. I thought that they were extremely supportive of him. I know Alabama fans were really excited, especially after his performance in the A-Day game last year. Very encouraging, even after the championship game when he had a walk-in touchdown that he dropped. So, listen, I can tell you, I followed Texas football for 50 years. I grew up out there. He's got a rude awakening because Texas fans can be really harsh.
Yeah, they can. That's the nature of fan bases everywhere, big-time programs. Well, still to come on Tider Insider Television, Alabama football gets a late addition to the 2022 signing class. We'll have details. And could the rich get richer, even richer? Alabama might be eyeing another high-profile wide receiver in the transfer portal. We'll ask Mr. Tider Insider Rodney Orr about Jordan Addison's interest in the Crimson Tide. How serious is it? Speaking of Texas, he's on a visit to Texas. And coming up, we'll be welcoming your phone calls, emails, and tweets. There you see the information on the screen. As always, you can call us at 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. Or email us, TITV@WVUA23.com. We'll be right back with the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, Tider Insider TV. And welcome back to TITV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism Sports. Alongside Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Well, Hutchinson Community College tight end Miles Kitzelman is joining the 2022 Alabama football signing class. He'll be in Tuscaloosa this summer. The 6'6", 250-pounder played in 3 games for Hutchinson as a freshman last season and made 2 catches for 16 yards and a touchdown. He did battle with an injury. Now, he graduated out of high school and was eligible to play Division I. That's why he can leave after just 1 year. All right, Rodney, you know, even I know how closely you follow recruiting, and I follow it still fairly closely. Very rarely in this day and age do you get caught off guard. I have to admit to you, Rodney, I had no clue. I'd never heard a mile of Kitzelman until Alabama signed him as part of the 2022 class. I was totally caught off guard.
Yeah. Well, look, Alabama was out there scouting another player who they've already offered, a four-star wide receiver, Malik Benson. They see this 6'6", 250-pounder out there running routes. He's very athletic. They inquire about him, and they find out that he's a really talented tight end. He was a high school offensive and defensive lineman, really small school in the state of Kansas, went to Hutchinson last year, was a starter from day one, injured a knee, had a surgery. It's an MCL, Gary, so he's completely healthy. And when Alabama saw him this spring, he was very impressive. They offered him last week. He accepted on the spot. And here's a guy that can come in. He's got great size. He's going to fill out, Gary. He's got an opportunity to be a really, really dominant blocker. He has the right mindset. He's very aggressive. Loves to block. You don't find a lot of tight ends that like to do that. You know, these inline tight ends nowadays, a lot of guys like to be receivers. He can do that too, but he is a guy that I think can bring some real dominant blocking.
Yeah, Alabama wanted another tight end. We thought it might come through the portal, but instead it comes through the junior college route. Hutchinson, one of the top JUCOs in the country, and Kitzelman is joining Alabama. And Rodney, quick thought on that scholarship. Pretty much opened up when Dane Shore announced that he was transferring freshman offensive lineman who enrolled in January and went through spring drills and then said he was transferring, but he went out with a long explanation on Twitter. I think everybody's supporting him. He said he's battled with mental health issues and depression throughout the years and just wanted to make a clean start. So we certainly wish Dane Shore the best.
Yeah, certainly do, Gary. And he was a really good player until he was injured in high school. So he's had some other issues, but hopefully he gets it all together. And
it appears Alabama might be a serious contender to add another big-time receiver transfer. They've already brought in two, Jermaine Burton and Tyler Harrell. Now the Athletic reported last week that Alabama quarterback Bryce Young was working out with the Biletnikoff winner, Jordan Addison from Pitt. He's in the transfer portal. Last week out in Southern California, Young, of course, that's his home. Addison entered his name into the transfer portal last month. Alabama has already, as we said, pulled two star receivers out of the portal. It was thought when he went into the portal, talking about Addison, he would wind up at Southern Cal. He's on a visit to Texas. But, Rodney, I don't think you're out there working out with the Heisman Trophy winner unless there's some interest in Alabama.
Yeah, it wasn't by coincidence. A lot of people said they wouldn't read anything into it. Look, who knows where he's going to end up? You mentioned USC. He's there at Texas now. His former Pitt wide receivers coach is now at Texas, so that's the connection there at Texas. But when you look at him, Gary, he's a guy that's probably a top 10, top 15 draft pick for next year. He looks at Alabama and sees all these five over the last 3 drafts. They've had 5 guys go in the first round as wide receivers, 6 go in the top 2 rounds. Had a lot of success. You know, obviously you had a Heisman Trophy winner as a wide receiver in Devontae Smith. You've got Bryce Young, who's the best quarterback in the country. He's going to get you the ball better than any other quarterback in the country, especially when you look at Texas. They've got issues at quarterback. They don't even really know who he is. USC has Caleb Williams transferring in. That's a new offense going in there. And if you want to win a national championship, which supposedly that's a factor, then Alabama certainly is a team that number 1 in the country going into the season. So Alabama would seem to have everything he would look for. So we'll see. If he visits Alabama, I think watch out.
Yeah, something's got to happen fairly soon. Either he transfers or he goes back to Pitt. We'll keep you posted. Well, on Sunday afternoon, Alabama baseball suffered a 12-3 loss to number 19 LSU at Sultana Stadium, and the Tigers clinched the series with that win, 2-1. And now Alabama, well, they're up against it a little bit, 26-22 overall, 10-4 in the Southeastern Conference. Popular wisdom is that if you get to 14 wins in the SEC, you'll get a spot in a regional. Alabama's got 6 SEC games left, 3 at Auburn this weekend, then 3 at home against Arkansas next weekend. Getting to 14 wins won't be easy. To go 4-2 in those 2 series, they might get an opportunity to win another game or 2 in the SEC tournament at Hoover. Alabama's at Jacksonville State tonight for their final midweek non-conference game. Alabama was up at last check 2-0. We'll have highlights tonight at 10. Well, coming up next on Tider Insider TV, a former Alabama running back has joined the hottest team in the USFL. And up next, we'll be welcoming your phone calls, emails, and tweets. Again, the phone number 205-348-9882. You can email us at the address on your screen or tweet at us. Use that hashtag TITV. We always look forward to hearing from Tider Insider Nation. We'll do it next, right here on TITV. Well, the Birmingham Stallions are the only remaining undefeated team in the USFL, and they're adding Bo Scarborough. Tuscaloosa native, great player at Alabama, played 4 seasons in the NFL with 5 different teams. So he is a guy that not only is a good, big, strong, physical running back, Rodney, you remember that about Bo Scarborough, but he also has that local appeal. And with Birmingham being really the only true home team in the USFL, all the teams are playing their games in Birmingham. This is a chance for Bo to get in front of the local fans, and I think it's great for Bo. I think it's great for the Stallions.
It really is. It certainly, like you said, Gary, be a big attraction. I know there's already a lot of buzz. I heard some buzz about it today at the gym. People talking about Bo Scarborough coming to the Stallions. It's already attracting a lot of interest.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to the phone lines. First up tonight is Charles over in Center. Hey, Charles, good evening. How are you?
I'm good, Gary. How about you?
Very well, thank you.
Well, I wanted to ask you a question about the Brockermeyer brothers. I didn't get to watch the A-Day game. I was wondering if either one of them competed, and if they did, how'd they do?
Well, James was out with an injury, Charles, and Tommy played in the game. Twin brothers, highly touted recruits out of Texas. Their dad, longtime NFL star and Texas star. I think they're going to be just fine. They're being developed. You know, you got to remember they just got here a year ago, and I think in the modern world we want to see these offensive linemen come in here and play right away. Sometimes it doesn't work out like that, Charles. But I tell you this: they're very talented. They've got a great work ethic. They come from great bloodlines as far as offensive linemen. I think they're going to be just fine. Yeah.
You know, as far as the A-Day game, Gary mentioned that James didn't actually play. Tommy did get some reps. It appeared that he got some reps with the first offensive line there later in the A-Day. And, you know, he had a couple of good reps, but he also went up against Will Anderson and Dallas Turner a few times. And, you know, maybe that didn't turn out as well. But those are learning experiences.
All the tackles struggled against those guys.
Absolutely. Here's the thing about Tommy Brockermeyer, and James for that matter as well, and you mentioned it, Gary, you hit the nail on the head. It's about development. This is the best place to be developed. I think if they stick with it over a period of time, they certainly have the potential, and I really think Tommy has tremendous potential.
All right, thanks for the phone call there in Center, Charles. Let's get to an email, and the email question of the day is brought to you by KDM Services, serving your family like our family. Remember, for all your heating and air conditioning needs, it's KDM Services. Do you think Alabama will ever waive out-of-state tuition for baseball signees? That's James in Tuscaloosa. James, I don't know. I mean, and what he's alluding to, Rodney, is that, you know, Alabama doesn't have a lottery. They're working on a hard, you know, 11.7 scholarship cap. And if you waive out-of-state tuition for out-of-state baseball players or athletes, then obviously it lowers the tuition cost, so it makes it easier to recruit a player from out of state. But I don't know the answer to that question because it's, you know, I guess I would say no because it's been something that's been talked about for a while, and still the University of Alabama, and it may even be a state rule for all the institutions, does not waive out-of-state tuition.
Well, first of all, I think they should give baseball more scholarships.
Right.
That's number one.
Yeah.
And number two is, I mean, why isn't there uniformity? I mean, you've got one school doing one thing, the Mississippi schools, the various schools doing different things. I mean, it's not equal.
Because I've always said it's not football. Can you imagine if some teams in this conference had 95 scholarships and some had 75? Nobody would stand for it. But because it's baseball, it's a totally different playing field for different teams in the league. That's just the way it is. All right, coming up on Tider Insider TV, Alabama women's golf is off to a hot start in the NCAA Regional. Can they keep it going into the next round? We will examine that and more. Your phone calls, emails, and tweets. You see the information on the screen, 205-348-9882. There's the email address. You can even tweet at us. Use that hashtag TITV. We'll be right back with the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, Tider Insider TV. The Alabama women's golf team is in Franklin, Tennessee for the NCAA Regionals through 2 rounds. Alabama's in second place with a team score of 2 under par. Vanderbilt is leading the Franklin Regional at 7 under. Alabama had trouble in the back 9 today. The Crimson Tide was at 8 under par at the turn before dropping a number of strokes there on the back. Still, Alabama's Polly Mack is currently 6 under par and sits second on the individual leaderboard. The final round of the Franklin Regional begins tomorrow at 9 a.m. The top 4 teams advance to the NCAA Division I Women's Golf Championships out at Scottsdale, Arizona later this month. And Bama women's tennis, they're in an NCAA regional. The Alabama women's tennis team lost to number 21 UCF 4-0 in the first round of that NCAA tournament. Still, though, another good season for Jenny Mines, the longest tenured head coach at the University of Alabama in Alabama women's tennis. All right, let's get back out on the phone lines, and let's get Jeff up in New Hope. Hey, Jeff, how are you?
I'm good, Gary. How you doing?
Doing well.
Rodney, I just wanted to know if you've heard any of the latest on the basketball transfers that Alabama are in the transfer portal that Alabama basketball is interested in.
All right, Jeff, before I turn that over to Rodney, let me say this. You know, they've got Mark Sears already coming in through the portal. Rodney, they've got the third-rated recruiting class in the country coming in for this next season. There was a guard from Oregon State that committed to Nevada that Alabama was involved in. Maybe you know a little bit more. I don't know right now that there's too much happening on the recruiting front for this season. Now, I'm not saying, Jeff, they won't add another transfer portal player, but I think this roster, especially with Quinterly coming back, is shaping up rather nicely.
Yeah, obviously they had been looking around and they've got their eye on the portal. Have I heard anything new? No, I haven't actually. So, you know, but like you said, they already have a great class coming in.
Yeah, Rylan Griffin, Jaden Bradley, Brandon Miller, Noah Clowney, Nick Pringle, and Mark Sears transferring in. That's some serious basketball talent right there for the Crimson Tide. All right, thanks for the phone calls and the emails, and we're going to come back and wrap up this edition of Tider Insider TV right after this.
It's a blessing because you said you promised me you was going to come back and get your degree, and then he remembered that after 7 years. It's a blessing in disguise, and just having a man like that, a father figure like that, and a coach like that, just to keep on pushing you to get your education.
Kept. NFL safety Landon Collins coming back to get his degree this past weekend, one of 91 current or former Alabama athletes that took part in spring commencement ceremonies over the weekend. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of TITV presented by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. Don't forget, if you missed any of tonight's show, you can catch a replay tonight at 10:30 or find it anytime at WVOA23.com. We're going to leave you tonight with highlights from the Alabama softball superfan Emily Piatek catching a foul ball in her sombrero. It was one of SportsCenter's top 10 plays of the day. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Have a good night, everybody.